Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a random live. I don't really know why I decided to do this. Part of it was because I did an early live the other day with Philip Abaji, and someone said, this is great, can you do lives at different times of the day so that you can include people from other parts of the world? This is right in the middle of the day. It's not ideal for anyone in America because they're not up yet, but actually still we got people hanging on in New Zealand, Australia, so I thought I'd do it, and I've got quite a lot to talk about with regard to military aid. It's a pretty interesting day as well with regard to what Donald Trump may say or may indeed not say. There's some interesting announcements in terms of Germany and Patriot systems. So it's good to have all of you guys around from all over the shop. This is such a wonderful community. We've got Saskatchewan in the house from the United States of Canada. We've got, goodness me, Belgium in the house, Sweden rocking up. We've got the UK OBS and anyone else in between. So thank you for being on board. Just let us know. This sounds like a real YouTube thing. Let us know where you're from in the live thread, whatever. Feel free to let us know where you're from. And I may indeed say hello to you for what it's worth, which is approximately nothing. No one wants to have me acknowledge them, really. It's self-aggrandizing, isn't it, for me to say so? Right, okay, let's go and look at what's going on in the world. Oh, here it goes. Here it goes. What now, Stinky? Hi from Australia. Where in Australia? That's what I'd like to know. And Stoke-on-Trent. Always good to have the Potteries on board. Okay, so we are going to go to the EU first, I think. Oh, no, actually, we'll go to Ramstein first, shall we? I'm just going to minimize myself so you can actually see what I'm talking about. And do please remember to hit the like button. Yes, like, subscribe, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, there is going to be another Ramstein, which is the Ukraine Defence Contact Group, which is now being headed by the UK. I think probably will continue to be so. The US last time, did they turn up? I don't think Hegseth did, and he turned up to, was it NATO just afterwards, or was it Rubio that turned up to NATO? So I think the ambassador to the UN or NATO, the US did send someone to the last Ramstein, but it wasn't anyone that you would otherwise expect. Greetings from Kiev as well. Oh, that means a lot, actually. Hi, Danilo. Really good to have you on board, and thank you for coming to get your news of what's going on in Ukraine, not from Ukraine, but from some rando in the UK. Appreciate that, mate. Okay, so it will be a virtual meeting, though, this next one in 10 days' time, according to General Freuding. We're going to come back to Freuding. He seems to be fairly important at the moment, and some people are pretty happy that he's a German military man that's been moved to a slightly different role, and he's incredibly important in the support for Ukraine. So anyway, quote, it will be a virtual meeting as the ministers have decided at this point, and it will be led by Great Britain and Germany. So GB and UK on the list there to control what's going on there, or to compare it, I guess. Right, the EU has unveiled $700 million worth of Ukraine support in a package for energy and infrastructure. The package focuses on restoring energy systems damaged by Russian attacks, repairing transport networks and border crossings, and supporting small enterprises. Super important. And there is just this great continuing support from the EU, which crosses all sorts of different domains there. Fantabulous. I just want to say a special hello to Chuck Chuckers from Melbourne. The reason I'm going to say hello to Melbourne is because I spent, in 1996, I backpacked around Australia, and I spent some good times in Melbourne, in all over Melbourne, St Kilda, Frankston, Karori. I stayed in, what was it? Backpackers Hotel, I think, down near the Prince of Wales pub. And I worked in a wood-fired pizza restaurant on Brunswick Street. And I used to go out water skiing and wakeboarding in the bay, Port Phillip, isn't it? And it just had an amazing time. Some people I knew in Frankston just happened to have like speedboats and water skis and stuff. I'd met them up in Byron Bay. and it was good times, really good times. Absolutely loved Melbourne. It was just, I loved everywhere in Australia, but Melbourne was particularly awesome. Anyway, that's enough. You don't need to know that, but you do now. You know it. Tough luck. Okay, so we're going to move on. EU transferred $1.2 billion to Ukraine using profits from frozen Russian assets. Ukraine has received more than 18.5 billion billion dollars from frozen Russian assets this year, directing the money towards swift recovery projects. Prime Minister Denis Mihal said, "Please don't make me do this. Please don't make me do my Australian accent." Oh, look, mate. Look, you're going to make me do it, aren't you, mate? Okay, look. I love a bit of Aussie meat, and I'm going to do it whether you like it or not. Okay. Anyway, enough said. So Denis Mihal, interestingly, is going to potentially be the next defense minister after Rustem Umerov is likely to be moved moved to being the ambassador to the US. Now, aside is the wrong word to use there, because actually that's super important, being the ambassador to the US, and you need someone that can bring about significant change of positioning from the Trump administration. But also the defense minister is one of the most important roles in the Ukrainian government. So moving the Prime Minister, Denis Mihal, to that role, I think will be good, because the Prime Minister is obviously going to have loads of experience in terms of high-level politics, and he'll have loads of connections. So this reshuffle that's going to take place is going to be very, very significant. But back to the initial post here, that transferring of $1.2 billion to Ukraine from frozen Russian assets is super, super useful. And I know lots of people argue about how the frozen Russian assets should be given. There's an argument. So given as a whole, right, you've got, say, I don't know, $300 billion worth of frozen Russian assets that the EU is holding on to, and they are loaning money out to Ukraine using profits from those assets to pay off the loan, so the Ukrainians don't have to pay that loan back. There's been some claims that part of the reason why the Europeans are not going to give the frozen Russian assets as a whole might be to do with some reciprocity coming from Russia, that they control a load of assets, European assets, and if you give them away, then that's having the other assets being given away. But then the question is, well, I thought you'd planned on giving the assets after the war towards reconstruction, and if you're going to use them up in that way, then you're not going to get the European assets back anyway, I wouldn't have thought, from Europe, but from Russia. But there are all sorts of different arguments concerning that, whether it's going to be a legal issue, whether it's going to turn away investment into Europe because people are worried about their money being frozen at some future point and put towards X, Y, and Z. I don't think that's a particularly good argument, but anyway, those are the ones that kick about. Right. Yes, I know Rick the Ukrainian. I've contacted him this morning. Yeah, it's all in order. I'll probably be doing a live stream with him this week. Okay, Norway joins the Tallinn mechanism to support Ukraine's cyber resilience, pledging over 2.15 million euros through 2025. The funding will strengthen the protection of civilian and critical infrastructure in what officials call the world's first cyber war. This is so important. The cyber war, the information war, this hybrid warfare that's happening all the time with all of the allies to Ukraine, and also other countries around the world, from the Sahel region of Africa, Latin America. We're all in a war with Russia, or against Russia, or involving Russia and China and other nations in the information spaces, in the cyber spaces. Norway have been tremendously supportive of Ukraine and continue to be so on a consistent basis. Incredible stuff there. And we have Lithuania providing over 20 million euros for education projects in Ukraine. Education Minister Lisovyi said 17 million euros will go towards building a modern school hub in Zhytomyr, designed to be safe, inclusive, and an innovative space for children. Additional funds will support solar systems in schools. I've talked a lot about decentralizing energy, and I think renewables is a key aspect of this, not particularly from an environmental point of view, although I strongly advocate for renewables from an environmental point of view. So there is that, but actually just from a security point of view and from a point of view of enabling infrastructure and schools and hospitals, for example, to keep working when major power stations are cut out or if there's an attack on the major infrastructure. I think you need to decentralize hugely the energy system in Ukraine, so it becomes more difficult for Russia to completely cut off entire swathes of the country from energy. I think if you get solar panels on top of schools and solar panels and wind turbines acting all over the shop and generators and all sorts going on in hospitals, then as there already will be, right? I just think it's really, really important. Okay. Zelensky has said, and this is where we start getting onto the real meat of this video. So Zelensky had already said that Germany will provide 2 more Patriot systems to Ukraine and Norway 1 more. So that is 3 systems, 2 from Germany, 1 from Norway. Unmanned Press then had a piece this morning, quoting Boris Pistorius, the defense minister, saying, "We definitely can't give any more on sending Patriots to Ukraine. Germany depleted half its Patriot air defense arsenal through transfers to Ukraine and Poland. Germany defense minister is to seek US approval to purchasing replacement systems for Kiev." Now, we've heard today, this is the update from the Guardian live blog, Germany confirms plans to get more than 3 Patriot systems to Ukraine. So this is now getting even further, even more Patriot systems, not just the 2 and 1, but more than 3. Wow. So in the meantime, we're getting some lines from Germany on Ukraine where the government spokesman has just confirmed that European partners will contribute to the purchase of the Patriot systems for Ukraine, while NATO will not be directly involved. I talked about this the other day. Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. So when he says NATO is going to pay for a bunch of Patriot systems, NATO doesn't really have the money to do that. It doesn't have the money to do that. It can coordinate sales and defense procurements, but NATO's not paying. And so when Trump says these things, he's very loose with his language, and it's really frustrating. People are very forgiving of Trump, very, very forgiving. The man just smashes his way through pressers by talking absolute nonsense and either outright lying or just saying stuff that needs clarifying and qualifying on a consistent basis. So NATO member states will end up paying for these Patriot systems. So one of the big announcements, I don't know how many, I don't exactly know what Trump's going to say today or do today, but there are all these different options. I think a large proportion of what he's going to say will be that the US is going to sell loads of stuff to other nations, which is not really the US helping much. That is the US selling stuff and making a profit and selling this stuff to other nations who are going to give them to Ukraine. And that's actually the hard work of these other nations who are going to stump up the cash for that. It's like saying, well done, Tesco's, for selling milk to the local neighborhood. Well done. Clapping on the back for making a profit. It's like, what are you talking about? It's what they do. They're in this to make money. And so here you've got the military industrial complex from the United States making money. Trump is just allowing them to sell stuff. So that part of it, I don't think we should be congratulating the US for. Although it's well done for not saying no, I guess is where we're at. Last week, we heard reports that Germany would pay for 2 systems and Norway for another one, but the spokesman now confirmed that from the EU perspective, the talks are about more than 3 Patriot systems for Ukraine. Reuters has reported. Discussions are now being held on the modalities of implementation, i.e. how many systems there will be, who will take them over, and how they will be financed, the spokesperson referring to the visit by Defense Minister Boris Pistorius to Washington. The spokesperson also added that Germany was seeing larger Russian troop concentration, adding that we must strengthen Ukraine's defenses. So that's quite significant there. Just seeing if there's anything else going on in these latest updates. Right. Oh, we are hearing now that, sorry, this isn't quite military aid, but we are hearing, this is what we saw. I reported this in my hits and losses video, that the previous Deputy Prime Minister, Sviridenko, who was involved in the negotiations in Istanbul and elsewhere, part of the Ukrainian negotiating team, but also deputy prime minister, is now going to become the new prime minister, replacing Denis Mihal, which means I assume Denis Mihal will go on to be the defense minister, and Rustem Umarov will indeed go on to be um, the ambassador to the US from Ukraine. Anyway, so let's stay with Germany. There's quite a lot to talk about concerning Germany. So Robert Nosnik Gdo. Thanks, JP. Nice to get a live chat while I can still see, for what it's worth, in Sydney and Australia. Thanks for being on board. German defense giant Rheinmetall has delivered another mobile rescue station to Ukraine, a critical addition to frontline medical and emergency capabilities. So these medical centers, these mobile medical centers, are super important. And a number of these have gone from different nations, including the Netherlands. They've been big on these previously. German aid says Rheinmetall has announced that it's already delivered the fourth forward surgical team station to Ukraine, financed by Germany. That's a plus of 2 since the German government stopped disclosing military aid in April 2025. 6 more are to be delivered by the end of 2026. The Germans, forget like tourists not going to Ukraine. And everyone going, oh, Germany. Germany, outside of tourists, are doing such a massive amount of assistance to Ukraine. I think Friedrich Merz has really, ramped up. He certainly ramped up the rhetoric in terms of Russia being the bad guys and being a threat to European security and unity. He's also, I think, gone up in the polls since when he took over. They dipped. Actually, he dipped. But I think the CDU and the CSU are probably, I don't know, Germans in the live chat can tell me more accurately, but I presume that they are doing an okay job at the moment of, not losing out too much to AFD. The question is, what do they have to do domestically in order to do that? And is it all going to be about being strong on immigration? It's the same kind of thing as the UK with Reform and Labour and indeed the Conservatives when they were in. Now, we're going to go back to this chap, Christian Freuding, the German Major General. He's reported it to the German-Ukrainian initiative, which was launched only in May. So this is the initiative to fund long-distance weapons. We don't quite know what this will entail. Will it be already existing drones like the Lyti? Will it be new drones? Will it be drone missile? Will it be cruise missile? Will it be ballistic missiles? What's this going to? All of the above. What's it going to entail? But anyway, it was only launched in May and includes a financing of long-range weapons systems. Will result in a first delivery by the end of this month. He said there will be a high 3-digit number in deliveries that will follow. It will significantly increase Ukrainian capabilities. So I'm thinking this is going to be a new thing like cruise missiles and enable Ukraine to strike deep into Russian territories. Wow. So this is major. Let's just look at Anton Gerashenko's readout of this to see whether there's anything different. So this is an interview with ZDF Heute. He said that then further deliveries will follow in high triple-digit numbers. Her high triple-digit is going to be over 500. So this will be, I'm guessing, sort of 700 to 800. I mean, that's whatever these are. That's a lot of something. The head of the Situation Centre Ukraine at the German Defence Ministry is confident that new deliveries in the coming weeks will significantly strengthen Ukraine's air defence and strike capabilities of Ukrainian defence forces. He also said that Germany has been negotiating with the US for several weeks on purchases of 1 or 2 Patriot systems. We've heard about that. And Ukraine through the Bundeswehr Pentagon channel. The issue was also discussed during the meeting between Chancellor Merz and Trump. Quote, our Minister of Defense will travel to Washington on Monday. So that's why we're hearing stuff coming out today, because Pistorius is over in Washington today to discuss the details. And we hope that we'll then get the results that can quickly strengthen Ukraine's air defense. Absolutely brilliant stuff there from Germany. And then you get sort of memes like this. Will the Germans be helping Ukraine to develop something that is to some degree analogous to the Taurus, and not give the Taurus? So they are. Pistorius has said, he said yesterday in the Financial Times that we are not going to give the Taurus. So that's not going to go. But are they saying that because they are relabeling the Taurus as some new Ukrainian thing and helping to develop? I mean, you can quickly develop something that already exists, and you can probably repackage that to get away with saying that that Ukraine are using the Taurus. So that we're helping Ukraine develop the Blorus, and the Blorus looks very similar to the Taurus, but it's not. It's Ukrainian. It's just using German money, or maybe some technology on the side. I don't know. It could be something along those lines. We shall see. Okay, so I already showed you the video of the Skynex system that is apparently successfully being used by the Ukrainians to take down Shahid drones, and that's what it looks like there. It's a platformed or modular system. I don't know, modular is the wrong word, actually. No, it's a palletized system that you can whack on the back of a truck and use it in a mobile sense, but also you can just whack it down next to a high value target and protect that target. German aid to Ukraine, because I was like, I can't remember. I think that, my understanding is they've got two of these, and that's exactly what German aid says. They've already delivered two of these systems to Ukraine. They're valued at $194 million euros a pop, including additional trucks as basis to increase mobility, as mentioned, with two additional systems being pledged for delivery by the end of the year. So that's good news. They'll have four of those. And that video shows that they can be used very successfully. So I'll just play that out for you a little bit while I have some tea. I'm going to turn off the sound. Not that you can hear the sound anyway, but it's a good cup of tea. So this is the first known footage of the Skynex system being used, and in some of these bits you can hear the rat-a-tat of the gun, but not in all of them, which suggests that the control to this might be somewhat, this is what I was speculating, further away than the actual gun itself. And I think that is the case. I think these can be used autonomously, but you can control them away from where they are, and I think that's probably what is taking place there. Now, staying on Germany and staying on German aid to Ukraine, we have the Lynx, news on the Lynx. Now, the Lynx is a Rheinmetall infantry fighting vehicle that I think, is there production of this already in Hungary? It's being tested in Hungary. It's also being tested in Ukraine. And this is the vehicle that the Ukrainians and the Germans and Rheinmetall were hoping to get produced in Ukraine, but it keeps getting delayed. The Ukrainians at the moment, from an indigenous point of view, have a lack of tank and infantry fighting vehicle manufacturing in Ukraine. Of course, that's going to be dangerous. You need to protect these sites. They need to be well looked after, maybe even underground, right? Let's just see what GAU has to say. In an article published today regarding an interview in the Bild, Rheinmetall CEO Armin Papiger announced that the Lynx, which has already been selected for both the Hungarian and Italian armies, is still being tested in Ukraine, far away from the front line. This means that the IFV, infantry fighting vehicle, has been undergoing trials for at least 6 or 7 months now, considering that Papiger told FAZ at the beginning of January 2025 the first vehicle was handed over to Ukraine from the factory in Unterlüß at the end of 2024. That's what it looks like. Looks very much like it has a similar turret to the Skynex that we've just seen there, which is also Rheinmetall's piece of kit. In this regard, it's also interesting to note that no further trial vehicles have been delivered since then. As recently as last October, the CEO stated that a total of 10 vehicles would be delivered to Ukraine for testing purposes. However, the reasons for this are completely unknown, although this could indicate problems with trials or production as well as a lack of funding. It's also possible that Ukrainian officials have realized that no further vehicles are needed for trials after all, at least for the trials. So the funding is an issue. Time is running out every week that passes, makes it less likely that Rheinmetall will achieve its goal of not only setting up production of the IFV in Ukraine, but also starting it as early as 2027. It would be the second time that Rheinmetall would need to significantly postpone the schedules for the Lynx, which were previously publicly communicated. Before this can happen, however, the negotiations with the German government on the financing of these vehicles, which has been ongoing for over a year, will have to be wrapped up. However, the German government is most likely waiting for the green light from Kiev and a corresponding demand inquiry. So it's going to be ongoing, I guess. check out German Aid to Ukraine. Please support his work. He has his own website. Go and keep that on your favorites list. Now, as I mentioned, Germany will not deliver long-range Taurus missiles to Ukraine, said Boris Pistorius. But it could be that they get an alternative that has been funded by the Germans. Here we have French aid to Ukraine reporting that the Minister of the Armed Forces of France has announced that the automotive industry is set to collaborate with the defense sector in developing a long-range loitering munition or kamikaze drone called Chorus for Ukraine. And one would presume that is Renault, the car manufacturer, as was previously reported. I wonder whether it's the sort of thing they'd absolutely want to get involved with, like a big car manufacturer like Renault. Would want to say, yeah, we want to produce stuff for the government. We can charge a premium. We can, make some money off this. The tech is pretty much out there. Loitering munitions. There are loads of people making it. And this isn't like there won't need to be massive amounts of R&D put into that. Although you want electronic warfare resilience, etc., etc. But whether they are thinking so often about, do you know what? If we do make this, we've got to make sure that we aren't going to be targeted by Russia. That there won't be some campaign against Renault, that this doesn't become a business problem for them going forward. And I guess they're always considering things like that. Now, talking about France, apparently they are to double their defense budget by 2027. I mean, that is phenomenal. We've seen the movement from around 2%, people below 2%, people above 2%. Of expenditure on defense as a percentage of GDP. Now, NATO have now asked for 5%. That's 3.5% of GDP spent on like classic defense stuff like wages and tanks and drones, and then 1.5% on infrastructure that would support that. So roads, there's no point having this army if you can't move the army around. So bridges, logistics and stuff like that. And then that helps out countries from a kind of just a general economic industrial point of view, and isn't just 5% spent on armed forces. It's 3.5% armed forces and 1.5% facilitating, I guess, the armed forces doing their thing. Now, sticking on France, this is not apropos to anything particularly other than actually this is the way warfare appears to be going. This is French company Arcus has introduced a new robotic ground complex with 8 Acheron LP anti-tank missiles. So these are ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles. 8 of them whacked on top of an autonomous vehicle, or not an autonomous, a remote controlled vehicle. This is the way that warfare is going. I shared a video of a UGV, an unmanned ground vehicle with a machine gun, this morning in my hits and losses video, where the Ukrainians were using that to attack a German position, going into World War II, a Russian position in a tree line. And I think Bertold on the thread said, this is pointless. UGVs are pointless. They're just like so vulnerable to drones. I'm like, no, it's not pointless. And in fact, here, literally, that video is a video of its success. So you can't just say these are a failure. And there are a number of things to say, not just like be contrarian to Bertold there, but we've got to understand that they are putting into place loads of contracts for UGVs. I think they're planning on getting 15,000 UGVs in the near distant future. They're using them for supplies. They're using them for casevacs, for getting wounded people out and dead people out of the contact line. They're using them for laying mines. They're using them for all sorts of different reasons. And while they are vulnerable to drones, everything in the contact line, everything in that like 15-kilometer corridor is vulnerable to drones. What you'd want is not one of these, but a UGV being vulnerable to drones rather than a human. The point is that you'd rather one of these bits of kits get blown up than a human gets blown up. And the fact that they are putting so much effort into getting more UGVs on the front line is testament to the idea that they don't think they'll be a failure, and they aren't being a failure. They will lose loads of them. Of course they'll lose loads of them because drones are a freaking nightmare. But the idea is that you're replacing humans with drones. We've seen that with UAVs, aerial drones. They're replacing human beings on the front line, the Ukrainians particularly, with drones flying about in the air to stop the Russians from advancing. Rather than having people in a trench line who would get themselves hit by drones, You take them out of the trench line, put them back a bunch of kilometers, and you have your own drones attempting to have air superiority. And then you stop the Russians advancing. You hit them individually as troops, or you hit their vehicles, or you hit their logistics, and that means that the Russians struggle to move. But actually, they do end up moving sometimes when they break through that drone defense, and that's because you've got no one in the trenches to stop you. Like, you've moved all the people out, it's just drones, and then if you can punch through on, say, motorbikes, then actually you can move forward fairly quickly. So it's not a perfect solution, but the idea is that there's a gradual replacement of humans, because that is a resource that the Ukrainians have, a real issue with. Boots on the ground, and drones are the answer, including UGVs. Anyway, let me stop sort of half ranting. Okay. Ukraine's ambassador to the United Kingdom, former commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces, Valery Zaluzhny, says the US has large stockpiles of aging missiles that are slated for disposal, and Washington could transfer them to Ukraine instead. I mean, this could be something that gets announced today. He's talked about there being, by the end of 2023, the US had produced over 170,000 Hellfire missiles. The service life is coming to an end, after which your weapons need to be decommissioned or disposed of. Ukraine can take advantage of this chance. Now, this was doubly frustrating because Pete Hegseth and Elbridge Colby put an end to Ukraine receiving Hellfire missiles when they stopped aid just recently. And it's been started again. I presume Hellfires are back on. But they stopped Hellfires going to Ukraine because apparently, they were worried about their own stockpiles. Well, these are old missiles that are obsolete, effectively. So just for some of the things that they stopped, their rationale made absolutely no sense. And Zelensky's got a point here. Like, get this stuff to Ukraine. Ukraine can use them, and you don't have to pay to decommission these. It's just a win-win. But ideology, frustrating. Right. Senate Armed Services Committee approves a $500 million aid to Ukraine as part of the US defense budget. So this is called the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, is it? So every year you have a budget for the armed forces, for the DoD, and part of that budget has been to give money to Ukraine, which is outside of the Presidential Drawdown Authority, the USAI funding, all these other funding streams for Ukraine. There's some funding within the DoD budget, as far as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong. And Hegseth cut that down this year. He said, yeah, we are cutting down funding for Ukraine. And then the Armed Services Committee voted 26-1 to move it from $200 million to $500 million, which is great. And they extended the assistance program to 2028 as well. So it looks like responsible senators are working hard to make sure that Ukraine continues to get its assistance. So the question is going to be, what does Trump say today? So there's that funding. There's supposedly a potential for $300 million in PDA, Presidential Drawdown Authority, take it from US stocks, give it to Ukraine. Could be more than that. Of course, he's got $3.86 billion to play with, Trump. So then there is USAI funding, which is funding to order stuff from manufacturers predominantly in the US to go to Ukraine. Then you've got the rumor that long-range missiles that can be used to strike into Ukraine. Axios reported this. So it could be that Trump, I think this is highly unlikely, but if he's going to suddenly allow them to use JASMs, like cruise missiles, for example, or something, PRISM, maybe the replacement to the ATACMs, like something like that, then Trump is going from being appeasing of Russia to then going, yeah, you can have stuff that can strike Moscow. And I can't imagine that Trump would do that. You're going from appeasement to escalation, as Russia would see it. I'd love it. I'd love it if Trump comes out today and says, yeah, you're going to have all this stuff. I've had a road to Damascus moment, and I've completely changed my opinion. That would be brilliant. It's just highly unlikely. I think it's going to be mainly leaning into selling stuff to Europe. I'm pretty sure. But there are so many people reporting that he is going to give defensive and offensive weapons to Ukraine. Let's just, hope springs eternal. Let's hope that actually that is, we do see a really positive change there from the Americans. It may even happen while I'm speaking. And what's fascinating is when you look at, and I love the This You Twitter handle, which the this you handle looks at what people say sometime in the past and then what they say now. And like, was this you? Did you say this before? Because only you're saying this now, and that's bonkers compared to, I mean, it's completely contradictory to what you said before. So this is the idea. This is ultra MAGA Chris. So imagine just some typical MAGA guy saying, in 2023, not another penny to Ukraine. Don't want any more money going to Ukraine. The typical kind of MAGA positioning. To then going, in light of Trump maybe deciding to give stuff to Ukraine on the 10th of July, saying what President Trump is doing with Ukraine is consistent with his prior messaging and part of the current minerals deal. Really? Because a couple of years ago, you said something quite different there. And what this is like, I will say whatever Trump is saying, and I will give my agreement publicly of what Trump says. And if Trump changes his mind, I will have to change my mind and come up with what's called a post hoc rationalization of my change of position, which is a post hoc rationalization is rationalizing my position after the fact. So, considering I was saying not a penny more to Ukraine before, I'm now having to argue that more stuff to Ukraine is a good thing because Trump has said it's a good thing and he's going to do it. So I'm then going to scrabble around and look for arguments to defend that position. So it's not the content of the beliefs; it's the alignment to the person. So this shows just cultic following here. Like, this is what a cult follower does. Dear leader, cult leader says X. I say, yeah, that's amazing. X is amazing. And then he says not X, and I go, oh, yeah, not X is amazing too because of let's look for a reason. Can't disagree with the cult leader. Right, Senator Richard Blumenthal. I kind of want to play this, so I'm going to have to put this on a different a browser so you can hear the audio here. This is Richard Blumenthal, who is one of the guys responsible for the what's he responsible for? The bill with Lindsey Graham. And he really wants aid to go to Ukraine, right? And he wants to put this bill that involves massive secondary sanctions on China and India and anyone helping out Russia. Here we go. So he then has something to say here. I'm going to play this. Hopefully you can hear the audio when I set it up correctly. Let me know if you can or can't.
These sanctions have to be tough and rigorous to change behavior. And so the waiver language that we will have in this bill is very much alike the provisions that have existed in past similar measures that give the president the ability to act in the national security, but also provide congressional oversight. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of assurance to my Democratic colleagues is very important. But what is most important, I think, at this moment is our unity. Senator Graham and I, Republican and Democrat, coming together, the European leaders with diverse views, also in unity. And we want to make use of the seized assets, again, in a unified way. I think a multifaceted approach here is the only way to bring Putin to the table because he's a thug. He understands only force.
But just to follow up on that, the seized assets, there's what, 300 billion in Europe. There's about 5 billion here in the United States. Do you get this?
And it's really important, by the way, because actually she said that there. I had a bit of an argument, not an argument, disagreement. I talked about how the US doesn't have that much in terms of frozen Russian assets in the US. I said they got 5 billion. Someone else said, no, that's not true. They got, I don't know, 100 billion or whatever. I was like, no, they don't. They literally don't. And I provided some sourcing, I think, for that. But yeah, there is actually not a lot of frozen Russian assets that the US has control over, which is weird. You'd think they would. You'd think that the US would have lots of Russian assets, but this is the importance of Europe. This is why I often talk about how the EU is the enemy of Putin much more than the US. I know in times of old, during the Cold War, it was, of course, the US against Russia or against the Soviet Union, but actually a lot of that fighting was taking place in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in these kind of satellite states, and either part of the Warsaw Pact or part of the Soviet Union. And now that you have the European Union, including many of those nations, it is the European Union that can stand up to Putin a lot more and a lot more meaningfully in terms of taxes or disinformation or regulation or the buying and of hydrocarbons. Right, the US doesn't buy hydrocarbons off Russia. The EU does, and so Putin wants to either control the EU or just disintegrate the unity in the EU. That is his number one goal. Turns out that Trump actually wants to do that too. But Putin will be looking to the EU more than the US in terms of, some kind of warfare. There is also the US. I mean, it is trying to undermine the US, of course, as well. It's not as if Russia is not the Russia losing in the war against Ukraine is in the strategic interest of the US. I know many in the US say this is Europe's war, you should fight it. And I am saying, well, it is Europe's war, but it is also America's war too. And in fact, the relationship between the US and Russia goes back an awful long way, of course. And, the idea of you've got NATO expansionism as this argument that is proposed is to do with the fact that this is kind of America's war, and America's doing in some kind of way in this kind of ideological 70-year war between the two nations. And so yes, the EU, I think, is enemy number one, but the US is also a major enemy of Russia, and it is in the US's best interest to assist Europe in this war.
Sense that the president's going to be willing to tap that, and that the European leaders are going to be willing to seize and use that money?
Part of the plan that I think will be sought in this meeting involving the Secretary General is for Ukraine to be given assets by NATO, and they're purchasing those military assets from the United States. But the seized property, the seized assets from Russia, can be accessed by the Europeans. They are devising a plan to do it, at least for a part of those assets, billions of dollars, in the interest that is derived from them. Very, very important resources for Ukraine. And the $5 billion that the United States has also could be accessed. Mm-hmm. And I think it's time to do it.
So that is trying to get the US on board in terms of using the frozen Russian assets in Europe. Now, we've seen the UK do this. We've seen, obviously, the EU do this. We've seen Japan and Canada do this, right? Those are all the main nations, but I don't that have frozen Russian assets. But we haven't, I don't think, seen the Americans use frozen Russian assets yet. And I think that's kind of what Blumenthal is saying there. Sorry, just trying to get my screen sorted out for you. It's amazing that I can attempt to multitask here, given that actually cognitive load is one of the big issues with multiple sclerosis. As you know, I've got primary progressive multiple sclerosis, and trying to do multiple things at once while still keeping on talking. That's why sometimes I'm just blathering, because actually it's just filling the time while my brain does other stuff over here. Anyway, right. Ukraine and the US will jointly produce gunpowder, according to Strategic Industries Minister Commission. And this is all really good news, because if you want the US to be on side with supporting Ukraine, you need them to be economically integrated or economically involved with Ukraine. I think the minerals deal did the square root of naffle in stopping Russia. The idea that this was going to be a deterrence. They signed a deal. They're already getting things moving in terms of tendering and recovery initiatives and whatnot. That won't change anything. You've had American entities in Ukraine, as in like buildings owned by or run by whatever corporation, being hit in strikes, right? Russians don't give a damn. So the idea that the minerals deal would be some kind of deterrence to Russia was never a good argument. It just wasn't. It needs to be much more. And actually, what you need is the US to be involved economically with Ukraine in such a way that, particularly not so much in minerals, but in defense, in such a way that actually the US economically benefits from assisting Ukraine in the war. That's what you need. You need an economic incentive for the US to be helping Ukraine. So this deal is signed between Ukroboronprom and the US company, involves production on American soil. At least, so again, that's tax dollars and employment in the US. At least 5 defense industry agreements were signed during the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome. I presume that's 5 with American entities, or rather than 5 in total. Anyway, there you go. Right, I'm going to just go to a couple of comments from you guys before going back to look at the rest of the topics and nuggets. Joe Hales, always great to have you on board, mate. Thanks, dude. Even if Trump does something now, now he simply can't be trusted. I mean, this is an issue. Like the European leaders and world leaders are continually trying to stroke his ego because you want the US on your side rather than against you. And the more you push the US away, or the more you criticize Trump for being a numpty with regard to whatever it is, the more he will just be retributive, hold a grudge, and then go more towards Russia. So as distasteful as it is, you are always going to get Mark Rutte and NATO summits having this exhibition of fawning over Trump and saying how wonderful he is. And it seems really unprofessional and it seems cringeworthy, but they have to do it. They just have to do it because that's what Trump is like. But they also know that he's inherently untrustworthy now because he flip-flops on freaking everything. I mean, tariffs, they're on, they're off. They're on, they're off. They're on, they're off. This is a nightmare for economies and businesses. They love stability. Businesses love stability. And Donald Trump is giving the opposite of stability. Instability. It's just, you can't trust him on anything. He flip-flops all over the shop. He listens to the last person he talked to. He doesn't have enough fundamental knowledge about all these subjects to form his own very strong ideological opinions. I think he's ideologically vacuous, apart from a couple of things like tariffs, but that's problematic. Like, strategic tariffs are fine, but tariffs on everything are that's just nuts. You're going to go through an isolationism that is going to lead to inflation and everyone thinking you're a knob. And that's where we're at. And so he's just inherently untrustworthy and inherently unreliable and variable because of all that flip-flopping. It's just dangerous. You want to be able to, both from an economic kind of business point of view, have stability, but also you need political reliability. We need to be able to go, yeah, the US is definitely going to have our backs. Yeah, the US is definitely going to support Ukraine. Where now we're like, well, maybe we stroke him a bit more. He will support Ukraine more. Maybe we say how wonderful he is. Maybe we put him in the middle of Chelsea football teams, like cup winning, jump up and down on the stage. Maybe we just put him there and make him feel like he's part of the team. It'll be nicer. Yeah, okay, let's do that. Just, yeah, crazy times. Tia Crossley, hiya, all the way from Accrington, Lancashire. Fun story. I used to live in Lancashire in a place called Inskip, HMS Inskip, a naval base, which is a naval transmission tower, 659 acres, mainly cows. My dad was in charge of the base. He wasn't some big, he was kind of medium officer in the Navy, like a 2.5, a lieutenant commander. We lived at kind of different places around the world, but one of the places that you only needed to be at this quite low officer rank to be in charge of. There was only 50 people working there, but it was a massive place, just fields, and all it was these big masts that stick up, and then they transmit stuff around the world to our bases and our ships and whatever. I wonder whether that's now so relevant. I wonder I think it might even be a tri-service site now, because in modern warfare you're using satellites and other ways, Starlink, for example, other ways of communicating, and I wonder whether our transmission and receiver bases are quite as vital as they once were. Anyway, his main achievement there was putting some ponds in so you could do some fishing. Got on the news for that. That was nice. So there you go. A bit of connection to Lancashire there. That was near Kirkham, where they had, what's a crisp factory in Kirkham? Begin with I. Fox's biscuits were made there as well. I think one of my sisters worked in she worked in a chicken factory. Yeah, anyway, fun and games. Lancashire. David, shut up, Pearce. What are you talking about? It's wittering on about like anecdotes from the past. Hi, Jonathan. From Dave in Hereford. Oh, Herefordshire. Which is it not Herefordshire where our SAS is based? We have trodden the same grass, I think. I used to live in Andover and was in barracks in Tidworth. Love your content, geezer. Although I'm not much to do with Andover, I was up near there recently at near Stockbridge where I gave a talk on Ukraine. But yeah, Andover is Hampshire. Hampshire's a big old county, though. Thank you very much for your kind support for the channel, David. Really appreciate it. And John Panciotti, absolutely great. And I always go through this, John. Is it Costa Rica or Puerto Rico? That's always my question. And then he tells me, and then I forget because brain. John is one of the huge supporters of the channel. Thank you very much, John. That is incredibly kind. Democracy will win simply because it must. I love the appeal there. It must win, but that doesn't mean it will. But let's hope that it bloody well will. Anyway, there you go. Right, let's get back on with it. Thank you very much for your super chats and your support. I love JP story time. Get yourself a cup of hot cocoa, guys. Let's sit back and have a story about some place I've been to in my past and what biscuit factories there were there. Anyway, just whatever. Sometimes I wonder how I have a following online, but there you go. Okay, we're going to move on to Ukraine, the indigenous kind of production of stuff as opposed to help from, say, Germany and other nations. So I have instructed, said Zelensky after a meeting with Rustem Umerov, I have instructed to contract all available volumes of priority types of drones. We are working separately with European partners on financing. This year, we should achieve significantly higher production and supply of drones to troops. Now, what this is with reference to is that big gap between potential and actual. So we often see Ukrainians claim that Zelensky claim that we are 10 billion. I think it's even more now, but let me just put that in context. So originally it's like we are $10 billion short of being able to produce what we can produce. So he said, we've got the industrial capacity here to produce all of this stuff. And if only we had another $10 billion worth of funding, we could produce at our capacity, but we're producing wildly under our capacity because we just don't have the money. So we can do the building. Like it's here. We've got the resources, we've got the know-how. We just need the money. If you finance us, we can build an absolute ton more stuff. And actually, that gap has got bigger, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because basically industrial capacity's got bigger as they are building more and more stuff in Ukraine. And now they're saying 40% of what they're fighting with is built in Ukraine, although there are problems with understanding that number. They just need, as the industrial capacity grows, they need even more money. So that 10 billion that was a difference between here and there, now the whole thing's got bigger. That gap is now, say, 30 billion or whatever. So yeah, they need more money, but that's not necessarily worse. It's that their industrial capacity is improved. Right. So then he's saying that we have worked really hard to get financing to close that gaps in terms of the drone capacity, potential and actual. And we're doing everything that we can to contract all available volumes of priority types of drones. So this is going to be, priority types of drones are going to be freaking all drones, I guess. But particularly, I imagine at the moment, interceptor drones. It's all about interceptor drones in terms of trying to stop the Russians from having such success with their Shahid drones. If they are going to send 1,000 drones into Ukraine on a given night, Ukraine needs to have freaking 1,000 interceptor drones ready to go, right? Ukrainian Tech gets a $58.5 million boost from global backers here. Ukrainian venture capital firm Flyer One Ventures announced the first closing of its new multi-million fund dedicated to supporting early-stage technology companies across Ukraine as well as Central and Eastern Europe. This is really good news. And actually, they've got some American venture capital funding as well for the first time, I believe, which has been really important for Ukraine. So this is excellent news. it was going to allow their startups to be able to be funded and have an effect on the outcome of this war, hopefully. Now, Ukraine and the EU launched a $117 million military innovation partnership. So this is all kind of similar sort of funding and activity. Ukraine and the EU will allocate 100 million euros, $117 million to boost battlefield-driven solutions under the newly launched Brave Tech EU initiative. It's all similar to like the Brave One and the points wins prizes, and all kind of linked. Announced at the Ukraine Recovery Conference there. Okay, good news. Now, talking about UGVs and that conversation I was having earlier, here we have Ukraine, and this is Dimko Zhuluktenko. I've spoken to him a number of times. Go and check. Fox's Biscuits is in Batley, West Yorkshire. There must be two. I'm sure there's a Fox's Biscuits, or there used to be in the 90s in Lancashire. Anyway, that's irrelevant. Not what 99.9% of you want to know about. Ukrainian remote-controlled rover using TM62 anti-tank mines as wheels here on show. This is a bit of a innovation, and we've actually seen this before. This is not new. I showed you maybe a year ago UGVs using mines as wheels. I think that's very clever. Why buy extra resources to make wheels when mines are round and can be a bit wheelie? So there you go. There's 3 mines on a like a trike, and they could be used to go and blow stuff up. So again, UGVs are useful. Now, this is Dimko. Remember, I've interviewed him. Go and check both those conversations out on my live feed, live tab. What you're seeing is advanced warfare. These are adaptations, but sometimes adaptations aren't like groundbreaking technology. It's just like, let's use a remote control thing, but let's have most of the framework of this thing, or most of the moving parts of this thing, be the very things that are going to blow up. So you're not having to carry extra weight. You know, the weight here is in the wheels, which are the mines. Anyway, moving on. Russian military channels report that Ukraine is nearing final development and production of the Hrim-2. So that means Thunder, Hrim-2 ballistic missile, comparable to ATACMs. It reportedly has a 200 to 500 kilometer range, 100 to 350 kilogram warheads, and speeds up to 3,000 miles per second, a major step in Ukraine's strike capability. Now, is this a coincidence that Germany has said, we're very close to what we are funding becoming a reality in terms of being able to strike deep into Russia as a weapon that Ukraine is producing with German funding and assistance? It could be that it's this weapon that's been long in the planning and development. I think they have used these previously, and they have been tinkering with them. I remember talking about Hrims literally years ago in this journey we've been on. You've also got the Neptune that developed into the long Neptune, which apparently doesn't actually have that much to do with the old Neptune anymore. I think it was, although the Neptune was a Harpoon actually that took out I think it's a Neptune that took out the Moskva. But in terms of what they need it for now and striking, say, across Crimea as a long distance missile, they've had to really kind of start from scratch. But they call it the long Neptune, but I don't know how much it's got to do with the Neptune. And that's my tea put back. And just to do a bit of spamming, as sometimes I do, look, this is a NAFO mug that has both our NAFO patches, 42nd Epistemology Battalion and Fighting for Truth and Freedom, Fighting for Freedom and Truth, the Owl of Minerva. So you can get that from all good... No, you can't get it from all good cup stores, mug stores. You can go to a link below, and that's my spam. Anyway, Ukrainian developers have presented a small-sized unmanned boat, the Ursula, which can be used for reconnaissance purposes and as a carrier of FPV drones. This is basically a really small remote-controlled boat, or a typically sized remote-controlled boat. But it is fairly, it's not your Magura V5. I mean, that is just, there's an FPV drone on the middle of it. So it's just bigger than an FPV drone. You can probably put a camera on it itself, and rather than an FPV drone, and drive it to wherever you want to go and spy on up the river, or you can put an FPV drone on there, and then that can take off. I presume it might act as a repeater. I don't know if that makes it too heavy and complex to do that. Although heaviness isn't too much of a problem when you've got the buoyancy to take into account. But anyway, that seems pretty cool. Big news. Ukraine is developing anti-air interception systems. It's unclear whether this refers to domestically produced anti-missile systems or high-speed kamikaze interceptor drones, says Visioner, to counter Russia's hypersonic aeroballistic missile, the Kinzhal, and hypersonic cruise missile, the Tsirkon. According to Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Pavlo Palisa. This is very significant because Kinzhals are a problem, and you otherwise have to use Patriot PAC-3 or perhaps SAMP-T air defense systems that are very expensive. If they can produce their own systems, whether it be some kind of drone, although these things move bloody quickly, so I don't know how drones will work there, but I guess if you know the trajectory, you know where it's going to hit, you just fly the drone in front of it and then blow it up, and the shrapnel may take out the missile. I don't know, but they are working on being able to take out Kinzhals, and that is super important. As it says here, as the Visioner says, at this stage, only Patriot missile defense systems in Ukraine's air defense are capable of shooting down Kinzhal and Tsirkon missiles. I don't know about SAMP-T. I mean, they reportedly can take out ballistic missiles, but can they take out the Kinzhal? I don't know. Right, Ukraine's Defense Procurement Agency has already contracted tens of thousands of Shahed interceptor drones, with more to come, said agency head Arsen Zhmadilov in an interview with Babel. He noted that procurement depends on both state budget capacity and the manufacturer's production abilities. So here there is not just that gap between potential and actual, but actually the potential isn't quite there yet because these are relatively new. So they need to ramp up the scale of production of these interceptors, but that's what they're prioritizing. Remember, we just heard that Zelensky is massively prioritizing that. So I'd expect there to be, in short order, an absolute ton of interceptor drones doing some really, really important work. Okay. So here we have the AFU receiving new anti-drone ammunition. I reported on this recently, but it's come around again. We've seen some loading of magazines of this. Don't know that I've seen it be used, but I think this is insanely important. In fact, the idea is that every soldier has a magazine of this. I wonder how useful this ammunition is for shooting against other soldiers. Probably less so. It doesn't have particularly long range, I don't think. But let's learn a little bit more about this, because if every soldier has this capability when driving around on the back of a quad or an SUV or whatever, when you've got drones flying around, then you've got a much higher chance of taking out the drones. So if you receive new anti-drone ammunition, it can be fired from standard assault rifles. The shells appeared at a critical moment and are expected to play a key role in stopping the offensive. The ammunition is a standard 5.56mm round designed for NATO-style CZ Bren and M4 rifles. After firing, the round disintegrates into about 5 fast-moving pellets. When fired with multiple rounds in quick succession, they form a shot pattern that can effectively hit drones at a distance of up to 50 meters. So imagine you've got an assault rifle and you are basically filling the air with a number of these rounds. Then that is like shotgunning like a shotgun. You fire once, fire twice, maybe not as quick. And depending on what type of shotgun it is, how many rounds you got a whole magazine of these things. You can take out a drone by just filling the air around that drone with these rounds. I think it could be really, really useful. This approach allows soldiers to defend against drones without carrying another heavy weapon. Instead, they can quickly switch to a magazine with specialized rounds and begin hitting the target. Ukraine is now increasing production to provide each soldier with at least one magazine of such rounds. So freaking important that. Now, I spoke to Philip Abaji Jr., the Nigerian journalist who's been looking into the activities of Wagner in the Sahel region of Africa, now the Africa Corps, basically the Russians, their disinformation campaigns, their influence campaigns, their support of the coups that have taken place in places like Mali and Chad, Niger, so on and so forth. this happened just after I spoke to him, and I'd love to speak to him about this. So, unexpected support for Ukraine today from West Africa. Excellent to see Ghana pledging drone support. It's really incredible to see many leaders on the continent carved up by imperialism now openly support 21st century fascist imperialists. So, what has happened in the Sahel region of Africa? In fact, we've got a kind of a map here. So, there's Ukraine, there's Ghana. These nations around here, so you've got Nigeria there. Hopefully you can see this. Yeah, Nigeria there. You've got Central African Republic here. You've got Niger. No, Niger is here. Which one's that? Is that Chad? And you've got Mali here. You've got Burkina Faso there. Now, so many of these are either overrun by, well, they're either controlled by a military junta that has been put in place or supported by Russia, or you've got massive problem with jihadists, like Islamic fundamentalism. And Ghana here is kind of like surrounded by these countries that are in an awful lot of trouble. So they, I presume, are making a calculated decision to go, right, we need to support Ukraine. We need to get into bed with, allies of Ukraine, with the EU, with the US, because we need to support our democracy here, and we are going to be under the cosh from pressure from Islamic fundamentalists and military types around us and Russia. So I think it's no surprise that you see this being said by Zelensky. I had a good conversation with the president of Ghana. We share a mutual interest in developing bilateral cooperation. We discussed areas where we can already deepen our partnership, first and foremost in the agro-industrial sector. Of course, agriculture is big in Ghana, but it's a different type of agriculture. But there'll be a lot of crossover because, of course, Ukraine is a hugely agricultural, industrial country. So cooperation in the agro-industrial sector and the creation of a food logistics hub in Ghana. We agreed to organize a ministerial level meeting, and a Ukrainian delegation will travel to Ghana in the near future. Ghana is also interested in our technologies, the production of various types of drones, and the experience Ukraine has gained during the war. Ghana is ready to finance our production, and we are ready to help our partners secure their borders. So, isn't it incredible that in the midst of a war, where Ukraine is desperate for people, it is important enough that they are thinking about the border security for Ghana. That is how much this is a world war, right? And people don't realize how much it's a world war. You've got Ukrainian soldiers in Sudan. Oh, was that one of the... Oh, Sudan's further up. That's Sudan, isn't it? But anyway, you've got Ukrainian soldiers in Sudan fighting against Wagner, Africa Corps members, doing stuff there. You've got Ukrainian soldiers supporting the Tuareg rebels fighting in Mali against the Russians. And you've got Ghana going into a partnership with Ukraine to support their own border integrity and their own military hardware in terms of drones, and to work in unison or bilaterally within the agricultural sector. It's just... Yeah, and it's important enough for Ukraine to do that they will put much needed resources into supporting Ghana because it benefits them. Ghana is ready to finance Ukrainian drone production, and we are ready to help our partners to ensure security of their borders. Fascinating stuff. Right, we're going to now go on. Sorry, this is a pretty long one, but there you go. That's life. We're going to go on to Coalition of the Willing and British-French stuff here. Prime Minister Starmer and President Macron during the Coalition of the Willing meeting, Starmer said, as President Trump has said, Putin is not looking to stop his attacks, and Ukraine has to be able to defend itself. Absolutely, nothing unusual there. So whilst this coalition will continue to stand ready to support a future peace, as leaders, we should shift our work in this group from preparing for peace to making it happen by forcing Putin to the table. And that means providing more military support and doing it now. So peace through strength, and forcing peace to come about by having Russia in a weak situation. Macron then said the coordination of the new UK package, the EU package, obviously the Senators package, will be a game changer, because this is not just a new bunch of sanctions, but something that can completely modify the impact of the Russian economy and convince the Russians to come back to the table. I wonder whether Macron and Starmer and the EU have also been doing their work in trying to convince Trump to make the sorts of proclamations he might well make today, that actually there's this understanding that finally comes about from, like, look, if you put these sanctions on and we put these sanctions on, the 18th package, and the UK does its thing, and we look at the shadow fleet, and then we provide weapons and we buy a load of weapons off you, but you also do a bunch of stuff, then Putin will come to the table and you can get your freaking Nobel Peace Prize. Whether Trump actually finally realizes what he should have realized 6 months ago. Like, this is the calculation is no different today. Like, nothing has significantly happened other than Trump having a realization that Putin is not to be trusted. We knew that 6 months ago. It's just that Trump didn't. Trump was like, no, I'm going to get in charge and I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to make peace happen. Just you wait 24 hours. And then 6 months later, he's like, oh, it turns out it's more difficult than I thought and Putin can't be trusted. We freaking told you so, mate. We did tell you that. But then Trump has this belated realization, and then he starts doing stuff that he should have done 6 months ago. So as I keep saying, we shouldn't be congratulating Trump. We should be saying about frickin' time. But we'll say that in our heads. And meanwhile, we will congratulate Trump. We'll stroke him. Oh, well done, Trumpy. Well done. You're such a big boy. Well done. Well done. And then he feels good about himself. Oh, do you want a Nobel Peace Prize? We'll get you a Nobel Peace Prize. And then, yeah, you're the best, you are. And then, that's how it works. Right. So the UK is ready for Ukraine peacekeeping mission if there's ever peace to keep. This comes from Unmanned Boat. British troops would help enforce an agreement that remains out of reach. So we are still, looking at putting in our troops. The question is, are we now getting to a point where the UK and France are going to commit even without an American backstop? It doesn't look like the US have committed to providing air support, which is kind of one of these components of a backstop that the British have been asking for. The French have been less worried about that, supposedly. The British have been like, we need the Americans as a backstop. But it could be that the British got to a point where it's like, yeah, we're not going to get that. And we still need a peacekeeping force. So the coalition winning announced a new permanent headquarters in Paris and a finalization of plans for a post-ceasefire force in Ukraine, according to the British government. In a press release, it stated that the following agreement on command structures for the force. Planning should continue on an enduring business as usual footing to ensure that a force can deploy in the days following the cessation of hostilities. A multinational operational headquarters led by the UK and France will oversee all tactical and operational arrangements. After the first 12 months, the headquarters will rotate to the UK. The force is expected to help regenerate Ukrainian land forces as well as provide safer skies and seas. So that's happening there. France and the United Kingdom, says French aid to Ukraine, are strengthening their military cooperation. Emmanuel Macron announced that Franco-British Joint Expeditionary Force, which was established in 2010, will, quote, evolve from brigade level to Army Corps level, enabling it to mobilize up to 50,000 troops for a major operation. So alongside what's happening here, the whole political landscape is one of the UK getting closer to the EU. I've talked a lot about this in terms of Brexit, right? We need to find the money that we're losing as a result of not being in the EU. So economically, we have been damaged from leaving the EU. So how do we get that money back? We need to access that marketplace. Do we become a member of the single market, the customs union? How do we get close to the EU without fully wanting to rejoin, because there's still enough pushback from reform and from people in the UK that won't want us to rejoin the EU. So we need to get closer in terms of defense. We also need to do that not just for economic reasons, but for security reasons. It's obviously sensible that we work really closely with other like-minded European allies. And so what you're seeing is the UK and French working closely on nuclear deterrence as an umbrella for Europe, moving away from dependence on the US. That's major, and that's what was sorted out when Macron came over for his state visit. The other thing is working in close unison economically in the defense industry. Then that allows us, without a deal that we did with the EU, Starmer did with the EU recently before that state visit, we did a deal whereby we now can access the tenders for defense articles that will come out, the ReArm 2030 funding, the 150 billion euros of low-cost loans that European Union member states can access, and that can go up to 800 billion. Well, that's an awful lot of money, and we're like BAE Systems and other British manufacturers to be able to provide stuff to the EU nations, because we've got a really important and big defense industry in the UK. So we then do deals to allow us to access that. We then are working more cooperatively in the functioning of our armed forces, as you can see here. And there's just a much closer alignment with the EU. And I think that's really important, you know, irrespective of your position on Brexit. I just think that we'll be really ill-advised to be moving away from the EU. We need to be moving closer in those particular ways. Right, Britain and France will jointly develop the next generation of deep strike and anti-ship missiles to replace the Storm Shadow. So that's another outcome potentially of the state visit. Here, the analyst says the UK agrees to order new Storm Shadow missiles after a visit with Sébastien Lecornu, French Minister of Defence, to Stevenage, where MBDA plant that refurbishes missiles is located. The UK MOD has announced it too will buy an unspecified number of missiles with France. In addition, France and the UK have committed to developing the replacement missile at speed appropriate to the current challenges. In other words, really freaking quickly. The UK will supply Ukraine with 5,000 anti-aircraft missiles, as I reported before. These are likely the Martlet missiles for, you know, or Starstreak for, well, those are two different missiles, but basically your MANPADS, man portable air defense missiles, or ones similar that can go on vehicles. It could also be, I don't think it is though, the missiles for, say, the Raven. That's Super Cat chassis, which has the air-to-air missiles put on board that have been pretty successful for the Ukrainians. But anyway, a $3.4 billion loan from the UK with a repayment period of 19 years will allow 5,000 anti-aircraft missiles to go from the UK to the Ukrainians. And then finally, just a couple of bits on Russia. Ukraine's military intelligence chief Budanov has told Bloomberg that North Korea now supplies up to 40% of Russia's ammunition for the war in Ukraine. That's why I did that my YouTube short video yesterday, sitting in the garden, saying North Korea were a game changer. You might not think they are, but they were a game changer. They changed the game for Russia. If North Korea were not involved in supporting Russia, I don't think the Ukrainians would have been pushed out of Kursk. I don't think that the Russians would be nearly able to achieve what they have done over the last 8 months. If you were missing 40% of your ammunition and self-propelled guns and multiple launch rocket systems and ballistic missiles, KN-23 ballistic missiles, you don't have those articles and that ammunition, you're in trouble. Russia would have been in serious, serious trouble. They're in trouble now, right? But take away 40% of their ammunition and articles, and you have a different situation. That was a game changer. North Korea being involved is a game changer. Then you add another 25 to 30,000 troops that may well go, on top of another 6,000 that may well already be on the way, sappers and reconstruction workers, whatever you want to call them. And then you've got 25,000 people going to Yelabuga Shahid manufacturing facility, and North Korea are getting Russia out of a hole. This is so important. Do not underestimate North Korea's involvement. They're insanely important, and they will continue to be. That additional that set of 25,000 to 30,000 troops is a hell of a problem for Ukraine. Do not dismiss those North Korean troops. Pyongyang is also sending ballistic missiles, artillery systems. In return, Russia is providing funds and technology, helping North Korea bypass international isolation. So, South Korean military intelligence reports that North Korea has supplied Russia with over 12 million rounds of 152mm shells to support its war against Ukraine. Since October, Pyongyang has also sent 13,000 troops, including 5,000 construction workers and 1,000 sappers, to Kursk. I don't know if that is including. I think that's on top of. But anyway, that's just my supposition. Big. I think that's just a big problem. Right. Okay. My brain hurts. Okay, let's go back to you guys, and a big thanks again to John Panciotti, just total legend. Paul Gilbert, the UK pulled a masterstroke by inviting Trump when Parliament was in recess. A few days in Windsor Castle with the locals booing him. Going to be fun times. I didn't realise it was when Parliament was in recess. Oh, so that's how you can get away with him not speaking to Parliament. Oh, I'm sorry, mate. Parliament's in recess, so he doesn't get that platform. That's very clever. Very clever. Good little tidbit there, Mr. Gilbert. Thank you for that, and thanks for your support. Michel Deval, wondering what the Antonov cargo plane was delivering from Germany, guessing some long-range rockets. So we heard that AN-124 plane that had been refurbished in Kiev on the quiet, and it's an incredibly useful plane. They need to be moving stuff around. It took off from Kiev and went to Leipzig, but I think it might have already. I think it might have been a return journey. I think they might have maybe gone to Leipzig, come back, and then gone again. And it had the call sign of F off Putin as well, which is delightful. And people are wondering exactly what came from Germany. And I'd imagine it probably was a Patriot missile system. You'll find that when things get announced, it's already in Ukraine. Oh, we're going to get 3 Patriot systems. They've been paid for by as it turns out, they're actually already set up and firing at Russian missiles and drones and whatnot. Might not be with the number of Patriots already, but I would certainly think it's a pretty safe bet to think that a Patriot system ended up going to Ukraine on that AN-124. I do wonder what the situation is with SAMP-T, because you're going to have the Franco-Italian manufacturers of the SAMP-T thinking we need to be competing with Patriot. Everyone's talking about Patriot again. The new SAMP-T NG is, I presume, going to have better capabilities than the Patriot. I mean, I doubt they'll bring out an anti-ballistic missile defense system that's not going to be as effective as one that's already been in place for years and years. Right, so the Patriot PAC-3 should easily be surpassable, I would imagine now. SAMP-T is going to be the way forward until, Patriot come out with something that's better. So I would assume, but we were hearing 2025 was going to be the year for that. I'd imagine they're going to be clamoring to get their goods onto the marketplace effectively. And Julian Rossiter found a box of CDs I thought lost forever. Carter the Unstoppable, Sex Machine, and Boo Radley's, plus tons of other 90s bands. Happy days. Julian, don't do this to me. I've got, 1,000 CDs there. Just there, out like there. I'm touching them now. The whole display of them. Music was my thing big time. 90s. I saw Carter USM. I never saw the Boo Radleys. I saw Carter USM in Brighton. Sheriff Fat Man is one of the classic 90s songs. I never tire of it. It's an awesome song, Sheriff Fat Man. More aliases than Klaus Barbie. Right, okay. Good to hear from you, Julian. And I'm going to be, I've got, what CDs have I got here? I've got all sorts. Last Dinner Party, they're a bit newer. What do I have? Bush. I have Gaz from Supergrass. I've got Ash. I've got Shed 7. All of this. I've got James. I've seen James like 20 times. I love them. Anyway, that's enough 90s music talk. But thanks, Julian. Appreciate that. Right. Okay. So that's pretty much that in terms of all the information I've got. And that should be enough to keep you guys going for some time. There's a decent amount of you here now. I hadn't even noticed 830 wonderful people listening in. I'm just going to see what the updates are from the live feed from The Guardian, because actually we might have had some announcements since I've been wittering on. So, weapons and ceasefire prospects discussed during the Zelensky-Kellogg. So Keith Kellogg, the envoy to Ukraine, is over in Kiev at the moment. We've got some more detail from a meeting today between US envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, and Zelensky after the readout from Zelensky. In a statement, the Ukrainian president's office said the two discussed Russia's massive attacks on civilians and infrastructure and bolstering of Ukraine's air defense, the overall frontline situation, and the needs of Ukrainian soldiers. Statement added, the president confirmed Ukraine's readiness to purchase American weapons, particularly air defense systems. So this is on top of Europe buying Patriot systems. Ukraine has money to buy. It said it wanted to spend, was it 30 billion? Or was it 50 billion? Like, even though they're desperate for money themselves, Ukraine, they've obviously got money aside. I mean, this is money that will be coming from Europe probably anyway, right? To spend themselves on American articles. So the parties also discussed joint drone production, possibility of direct purchases of Ukrainian drones by the US, potential for arms procurement in cooperation with European partners. Zelensky and Kellogg also addressed the prospects for a ceasefire, the need to increase pressure on Russia, and joint steps towards achieving a lasting peace. Special attention was paid to sanctions, including the bipartisan bill from Graham and Blumenthal, which has already garnered support from over 80 senators. And then, of course, we also hear about Denis Mihal replacing Umarov, possibly, and certainly Sviridenko replacing Shmihal there, as mentioned earlier in this video. So you got a new Prime Minister of Ukraine. And then, Peskov briefing. Nothing else that we need to go through at the moment. Anyway, that's enough for now we go. Now don't start talking 90s music. Ride and it keeps going so quickly I keep clicking on the wrong one. There you go. First big band I saw was Ride. A bit of shoegazing there. My ears rang for 3 days. Yes, happy days. Anyway, that's enough from me, guys. I really appreciate your support. I dare you to listen to Porcupine Tree. Never heard of them. I might have to look into them. I saw the Red Hot Chili Peppers in Reading. I can say Reading 95. Reading Festival 1995, I think it was. That's the only time I've seen the Chili's. They had light bulbs on their head, I think, in that particular on their heads on that particular gig. Fun and games. Okay, that's enough. That's enough, Piers. That's enough. Otherwise, we can just sit here chatting and drinking tea. Someone. Deep Purple. That's a bit before my time, although Smoke on the Water was a childhood favorite of mine. AC/DC, I've not seen AC/DC, but the Razor's Edge album, I used to get these tapes. So I because I lived around the world, right? I was kind of went to boarding school, what elitist, whatever, but actually Navy paid pretty much for most of it. So we lived, Hong Kong and Gibraltar and places, Lancashire, that's even more foreign. And I remember getting like mates that used to come through Dubai from airports, and I did a few times, and you could buy what were called Thompson originals, and because they had no copyright law, you could just buy cassettes that were the albums, but just for peanuts. And so I just used to have so many Thompson original cassettes and Razor's Edge was one of them, and I played that till it wore out. Thunderstruck is obviously, and now I spend my time looking at reaction videos to people watching Thunderstruck live in concert and stuff, and just get excited. But anyway, a bit of AC/DC there. Anyway, honestly, that is enough now. Time to go. Rage Against the Machine. Have I seen Rage? I haven't seen Rage. I'd like to see Rage. Oops. Ozzy Osbourne's just played his last gig. Iron Maiden is definitely the band I've never seen that I want to see. Would be Maiden, actually. But there you go. Okay. Take care, everybody. I really appreciate you. Speak to you soon. Thank you to John Panciotti and all the very kind people in the live chat for their support of the channel. Appreciate it. Toodle pips. Oh, no. Don't go. Do not go. I keep forgetting to do this. We are doing a Jiggers Paw fundraiser at the moment, a campaign. It should be donate. Sorry, my fingers aren't working. ATPGEO.com/donate. That's what you want to follow to get to our latest campaign. And this one is the Jiggers Paw Drone Lab fundraiser. I'm going to get in contact with Arena and this chap here and hopefully get an interview with them. And this will be a guy that'll be using them. I think he's associated with the 47th Brigade. So there you go, 47th Brigade, Dan. We'll get him on. At the moment, we're almost at $10,000, and I haven't even talked about this enough. We've got 2,340 coming from one person in Germany. We had 1,450 from someone in the Netherlands. We've got $4,000 coming from someone in Great Britain. This is absolutely staggering. Thank you. Another $500 from Britain, and so on and so forth. Thank you. But even if it's a tiny amount, or if you can't afford anything, just throw out the link and on the socials, and that would be fantastic. So we are doing really well there, but we're going to be running that for this month. I'm going to hopefully get some interviews sorted out concerning that for you. And I'm not even showing it to you. This is the drone lab there. Drone lab. I really shouldn't have my face on there. It doesn't need my face. I need a logo. So this is a 47. That's Dan. That's Arena. You've probably seen Arena before. I've interviewed her a number of times from Jiggerspore, and that's what we're doing. Just incredible amount of assistance there provided by you guys. Just really, really superb. So it's in the live stream. Thank you to Cheryl, who always does a good job of putting in the links for me. Take care, everybody, and Slava Ukraini.